Distribution provided by Cloud Sigma, the cloud that adapts to you. Visit cloudsigma.com/thisweekin for a free $200 credit.
Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by ShareFile from Citrix. Secure file transfer built for business. Visit sharefile.com, click the microphone, and enter TWiST for a free 30-day trial. And by Sourcebits. Visit sourcebits.com to begin your mobile app development journey.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and this is This Week in Startups. I am in New Hampshire for a DYN board meeting, and I'm here with Jeremy Hitchcock, who is the founder, and he's going to tell the story of how this company grew from this, tiny little start to 200 plus employees over the last 10 years, and it's quite an amazing story. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis here on This Week in Startups. What a great episode we're having, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank our friends at ShareFile by Citrix. What a great product. You can share files instantly of almost any size, access files from any computer or mobile device in a safe and secure environment. It's built for business, and really I love these great features. You can request a file. So, let's say I need a file from you, but you're not using ShareFile, and I just say, hey, listen, here, I'm going to email you. You get a link, and you can put it in my little, request file. And then I get an email alert when you upload or download files. You can share large video clips. It just works. And, I've been using it here at This Weekend. The audit trail is amazing. When you start looking at your files and you're able to see who opened stuff, who opened these asset files, and who has the rights to them, this is really cool stuff that they're doing, especially with the audit logs, incredible, and with the request files. This is industrial strength file sharing. So visit sharefile.com and click on the radio microphone button and use the promo code TWiST. That's the essential thing you need to do. TWiST for a 30-day free trial. No credit card required. That's the sign they're so confident that you're going to want to use this product. Go to sharefile.com, click on the radio microphone button. Use the promo code TWiST. TWiST. TWiST, TWiST, TWiST. 30-day free trial. Thank you so much at ShareFile. What a great product by Citrix. And if you want to go ahead, if you've already gone and gotten ShareFile at sharefile.com, thank at ShareFile on your Twitter account. Just say thanks for supporting This Week in Startups at ShareFile. I think it's really cool of you to do that because I get so much out of it. And it's a great product. It's rock solid. It's industrial strength. And if you really want to know, like, hey, when are investors downloading this pitch deck and how often are they downloading it, et cetera, or I'm going to request them to get the term sheets back, sign documents, whatever, request the files, have them put them in that secure and built for business, safe and secure. Yes, thank you at ShareFile by Citrix. Let's get back to the program.
Jeez.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis. Welcome to This Week in Startups. If you don't know what the program is about, well, gosh, I can't help you. This Week in Startups. Every week we talk about startup companies and how to build something that changes the world. And today you're going to hear an amazing story of a little company that grew from nothing in a little town in New Hampshire called Manchester, and now is one of the most important companies in infrastructure that I've actually started to get involved with. I joined the board just this year, or in the last 6 months, and it's quite an amazing story, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. Welcome to the program, Jeremy Hitchcock.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're here in Manchester.
Manchester, New Hampshire, the internet capital of the world.
Absolutely. And tell me about Manchester. This town was created how? I mean, it's pretty amazing. You drive in and there's like dozens and dozens of these huge industrial buildings which you guys can't see on the camera, but around us, basically huge factory buildings that you're now got this internet company in. But what was the origin of Manchester?
Yeah, so some dude in the late 1700s, he wins the lottery and he travels the world because that's what you do when you win the lottery.
Sure.
And he goes to Manchester, UK, and says, man, I really like the industrial base that's in Manchester. Comes back to what was called Deerfield at the time and says, we're going to rename the town and we're going to call it Manchester.
And That's it.
And that's it. He builds this huge textile producing capital, this manufacturing base, and all the buildings are basically these large 500,000 million square foot office skyscrapers on their side.
Yeah. Just tens of thousands of square feet per floor. It's amazing. And Dean Kamen is here.
And Dean
down
Kamen's
the block.
just down the, right kitty corner to us. He's a cool
What's
guy
the
to hang
name
out.
of his company?
Deca Research.
Deca Research. That just sounds like something from like RoboCop or something. And it kind of is.
Kind of is.
He makes the Segway.
Makes a Segway.
He makes he also makes the arm,
The Luke arm.
the Luke Skywalker arm. And I think he also is he making the full bodysuit?
Well, we can't talk about that.
Oh yeah, see, I think that's the thing he's working on. And there's like, no, that's been in the news though. He's building like the what do they call exoskeleton. It's like a skeleton that goes around your body and you can just like lift like thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
But it's quite a little tech hub here now.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting companies that are doing cool stuff. There's a couple spin-outs from them and from a few other companies that are doing some neat stuff. There's some Active Shocks companies that are building like dynamic shock dampening systems. Pretty neat stuff.
Interesting. And so let's talk about DYN. You started the company when and for what purpose?
Well, it was an open source project, kind of the turn of the century, and it was useful for getting a paper off of a dorm room computer. So I went to school in Worcester. It snows and it's cold, and printers were in one building, and the place that you turn in a lab was in a different building, and where we'd actually work on the labs was in a third place. So that's a lot of outdoors, a lot of cold.
Right.
So we built some technology that was useful for addressing computers remotely before there was kind of the log me ins and the go to my PCs, and it saved the trip out in the cold, but it was useful for other people too.
And then it becomes DNS routing at some point, and becomes from an open source project to an actual company.
Yeah.
And so how did you make that jump, and why did you decide to do that? Yeah.
So we had a good user base, about 25,000 people, and we were starting to get tired.
Yeah, wait, I missed something there. How did you get to 25,000 people?
Well, there was one day, and then the second day we kind of shrugged. No, it was something that was just kind of enjoyed by the community, enjoyed by the internet world, and people just word of mouth would talk about it, like, hey, this is a way that I can run a web server on my home computer. I can access files remotely. I can move things around, and the ability for consumers to kind of access like the kind of the control plane or the accessibility of DNS and routing was really foreign. It just was a bunch of ISPs that were doing that.
How would you explain how DNS works to just somebody who has a casual understanding of the internet? Because I think a lot of people are building internet companies now, even technical people, and they don't actually understand how the internet works at its core. When people make a request, what happens?
So we are the address book, or we run part of the address book system. So you type in a domain name like DYN.com or Amazon.com or Twitter.com, and your computer doesn't have any clue what that is. And it doesn't actually use names. It uses a bunch of numbers just like a phone book does, and the phone system does. So your computer goes out and it scours the internet through the DNS system to find the address book that has the entry for DYN.com or Amazon.com or Twitter.com. Your computer gets that phone number, or that what's called an IP address,
Right.
And then your computer directly connects through that IP address to download the web content.
And so what does DYN do in between that sort of process?
So there's a lot of magic that takes place in kind of the tens to hundreds of milliseconds that this all happens behind the scenes.
Right.
But what we do is we optimize the routing, make sure that people get to the closest data center. We look, and we have some health checks that we make sure that somebody's website's running. And if we see that stuff is down, we redirect people to different places and kind of understand what the internet topography looks like and try to shift things around so people get faster, better internet experience.
And when you made this into a company, you started to have people using your service to say, oh, point this IP address to this computer. Because people at home, their IP address changes. Mm-hmm. And so this was sort of the core innovation, would you say?
Yeah. It was the ability for us to update records really fast. And for all that information to kind of work across the internet. So if you made an update or your ISP changed the address for your computer, that you'd be able to access it 30 seconds or 60 seconds later. And that technology works for our millions of people that use that remote access technology, and also works for some of the internet bellwethers when they have an outage. They don't want to have that outage for very long, or they want it to be noticed as short of a period as possible, and so we move things around quickly.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this concept of a freemium service is something you guys innovated in what year? I mean, you provided the service for free.
Yep.
Up to a point or something, and then charged. So When did you do that sort of free to paid process?
This was 2001, 2003, and this was before even like Salesforce was doing the whole SaaS model. I mean, that wasn't a word.
Yes, that software as a service didn't exist at that time.
Yeah, and it was really challenging to figure out like what's the right model for this, because you buy hardware, that's really one side of the expense, but you're in a data center and you have to pay these monthly bills. And so trying to get our head around the cost model and the revenue model, we're a bunch of college kids that are taking classes, so this is kind of a hobby at night.
Right.
But there wasn't a whole cohort of people to hang around with to figure out what's the right way to charge for things. And so when we first started, we said, why don't you give us money one time and you can use a service? And the concept of expirations we didn't think about that because we thought, $30, for a college kid, that's a lot of meals, it's a lot of ramen.
Yeah. So people just paid $30 to set up their DNS routing, and that was it. Flat rate, boom.
Yep.
For life.
For life.
Yeah.
And we still honor those for life customers today, which is really cool.
Oh, really? There's still a bunch of those who just paid $30 and they're just good for life.
Yep.
But then you moved to this sort of free model at some point, and when was that?
So we had the free model at the same time, and then we kept that pretty much until a couple years ago. We moved to more of a trial method to combat fraud, because our services unfortunately get used. It's internet infrastructure, so it gets used for nefarious things.
And when did it go from being? When did you realize this was more than just a hobby? You should probably turn it into a business.
It's probably 2003. So we'd been working on this for a few years at this point. It was my junior year in college, and we were all kind of sitting around and thinking, what do we want to do when we grow up? And this was also the time where we started looking at this one-time model, and that was when we started introducing the concept of a service expiring. Right. And we were pretty bottoms-up, user-base driven. They were the customers. They were the people that were giving us the resources to be able to do what we were doing. So it was 2003 that we made this modification to expire services and grandfathered everybody in, and that was also when we said, this looks like a real thing. This looks like a real company.
And you started hiring people and got an office at some point.
Yep.
And how quickly did it grow over the years? Because now it's a pretty large business 10 years later.
Yeah, so 2003, 2002 is when we hired a couple people. We moved up to Manchester, where myself and one of the other co-founders was from. And we started hiring kind of steadily. We were probably 30-50% year-over-year growth for a number of years. And then about 06, 07, one of the co-founders left. It made us do another one of those rounds of soul searching, and we saw some customers that were, pretty interesting internet companies, or just really large, like Subway or Anadarko Petroleum. Like, whoever thought that somebody right out of school would have those as customers? And we said that we wanted to be an internet infrastructure company. We really enjoyed the operations of technology, and we started going after kind of a wider continuum of these DNS type of customers.
And bigger companies started using it. Why? They obviously could build some of this technology themselves. They just felt it was so much easier and cheaper.
Yeah, it was one less thing. When I think about what the real genesis was, people were using these services at home. They were enjoying them. They always worked. They were no nonsense, and they did what they were supposed to do. That was, and it seems like such a novel idea of like you go out and you say, hey, this is a service and it's just going to work, and that was kind of the approach that we had. But I think a lot of people at that time, it was really difficult to find services like that where you could just say, I want something that's going to do routing, or I want something that's going to do DNS, and I'm going to find a company that's going to provide that service. And I think one of the baseline features of infrastructure technology is that it's very reliable and it's very redundant, and that was something that we had always taken a great level of care and concern for. And
and you start getting bigger clients, but they're still paying these tiny prices. So how do you, as a company, you're an enterprise company in a way. You're a consumer company and an enterprise company. Consumer is essentially free, and the enterprise is, I guess, where you make your money. But how did you decide, well, gee, these are large enterprises, and maybe they should pay a different price, and how to sort of build that as a model?
So we asked them, and we said, hey, $30 does not seem like the right way to do it. And we actually had a great story. Evan Williams registered Twitter.com through us. He was working on Odeo at the time, and we were having a conversation with some people who were running the ops side, and like they were, at the 2009 timeframe, they were starting to get really popular and busy and kind of exploding. We're, you guys are paying us $30 a year. What what do you think is a fair price? Obviously, it's not $30 a year. And they said, well, what would you do list-wise? We said it's $5,000.
Right.
And so we found a price in the middle, and that was like one of the first times where we legitimately said there's value to people, and by having like this weird $30 pricing or this kind of consumer pricing, like it didn't quite work.
Do they think if it's $30, I can't actually take it seriously?
We had those comments too.
Yeah.
There was some people at public companies that say, I bring a $30 PO to a CFO, and he laughs at me.
Can you please add a 0 or 2?
and I mean, that could have been one direction we went, but we thought long and hard about how we wanted to build the technology out, how do we want to build the product out, to have more globally redundant features, how to make, we used IP Anycast, we use a lot of traffic routing, a lot of advanced features on top of what we do. It's not just kind of like the generic, I type in a computer name and it goes to an address and we're done.
It's about speed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And reliability now.
Yeah, it is. And I think that was certainly in the back of our mind in kind of the 08, 09 time frame. But that whole like slowness as like the new downtime, like it used to be that, hey, getting your site and keeping it online was the challenge, and now it's about making sure it's fast. And that was in the back of our head kind of in the 08, 09 time frame. And I think that now it's a lot easier and it's a lot more accessible for people to have a really awesome web experience.
Speed it's an interesting observation. We were just trying to keep the servers up until 2007, 2008, 2009. But then this incredible thing happened that, consumer web products would scale, I guess because of network effects or whatever, just tremendously, so fast. And we kept seeing this concept of things became popular and they went away. That's something where people have gotten much more sophisticated on how to scale, haven't they? The whole industry.
Yeah, there's a lot more people that are going through that. I was 10 users yesterday, and now I'm 1,000, and I'm going to be 10 or 1 million next month. And it takes a huge amount of thought and process of how users interact, how you still maintain that kind of intimate experience, and how you just scale. I mean, the technology side alone is a really challenging thing, and now there's a lot more tools that make that stuff happen.
And you guys also at some point moved into mail delivery. Mm-hmm. What made you add that service? Was it consumer demand, or was it just you thought this is a place where we are good at providing infrastructure as a service? Let me, segue into that.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix. So we had run a bunch of consumer services, and our consumer services, our adage had been, we're offering all the things your internet service provider should do, but just doesn't want to because it's not big enough, or it's not sexy enough, or just erodes their margins. It was kind of one of those. And we had a bunch of email technology services where if you're running a mail server at home, we had some things that would make that easier. As the DNS product was trying to take off, we were thinking about other things that were performance oriented, and we wanted to do something that was also a little non-traditional. We didn't want to go and kind of be a number 2 in a space or kind of challenge convention. I mean, I think that we could, but it was more interesting for us to kind of blaze a different path. And there's some other people that are doing email delivery. Or kind of messaging in general.
SendGrid, MailChimp,
yep.
A bunch of folks who do it as well. Yeah.
And we saw a lot of our customers who were trying to build web applications, they were trying to scale, and one of the problems that they kept running into was they could send 1,000 messages to 1,000 different users, but when they got up to 10,000 or 100,000, they'd start getting blacklisted, and we also saw some of our best customers hiring people that were email deliverability people, and so we said, oh, that's an interesting product, and we launched that a couple years ago.
And how is that done? And how do you look at the future, adding services or just being the best at, a small set of services? It's got to be a constant, you must have constantly people inside the company saying, let's add these 20 things. Everybody's got a different idea of what the next big thing would be. And then you've got this reality of being number 1 in DNS and, being one of the top players in email. How do you, as a CEO, balance expansion versus being the best?
That's a great philosophical question. I wish I had a great answer for you.
I just want to know because I'm asking myself the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the company goes through different cycles. You try a couple things, you see which ones work, you see which things don't work, and you get rid of the things that don't work, and you have to be not shy about that. With we're probably this year is going to be a year that we're going to start thinking about what are the next things. We think that DNS and email have some great runway ahead of them, but the mix of products, it's easy for anybody to offer 10 products, but I think it's challenging to offer 2, and I would say this is a 200-person company. It's pretty tough to get 2 products really well polished and really right. And I think as a company, we're probably not ready for a 3rd or 4th yet.
Yeah.
But the things that we do very well, we're performance oriented, and we keep things running. And whether it was, we're not going to be a microblogging site, but I think that we have a lot of the capabilities to run that type of technology really well. And so I guess that's the landscape, and it's based on who our customer base is.
Now, you didn't raise any funding for this business when you started, or did you raise a friends and family?
We had those donation guys.
You had the donation.
They gave us $30 at a time.
Exactly.
Cheesecake Factory in Newton.
Yeah. So you basically built the business off of this sort of revenue. And at what point did you start coming up on the radar of venture capitalists or angel investors? Because when I met you guys, I don't know, Kyle, who worked with you, emailed me a year ago or so. You hadn't ever raised money, and I was absolutely confounded by this. When did you first, come on the radar of investors?
It's probably 06 to 08, where enough people were starting to say, this infrastructure space is kind of a fascinating area. It seems where there's a lot of growth. And we had the first conversation, our first exposure about what life might be like. And I think we were also having enough time and cycles to be able to reach out and talk with other internet companies. And we were also thinking about what we wanted to do. So we were always talking to our customers who are technology people, and a lot of them were venture-backed. So we always had kind of the understanding of what that world may look like. But being a donation originally funded service, it made us extremely frugal, and we had to make sure our business model worked kind of in a profitability and cash flow basis.
But it was working fabulously. I mean, and you still, for half a decade, shunned raising any money.
Yeah.
So what was the decision there? I mean, was there people in the company saying, why don't we just take down a $5 million round and make life super easy and just spend a bunch of money? But you didn't do it. Was that just you scared the VCs might screw up the business, or we just simply don't need the money because we're profitable?
Yeah, it's kind of all those things. I guess it's all the traditional reasons why you wouldn't why a successful, growing, happy company wouldn't need any sort of outside capital. I mean, there were certainly things we could do differently. We could probably grow faster. We could take on more products. We could go after different types of customers. But really, when we came to it was fun and interesting for the business to keep going in its capital structure. And probably the other thing was, there was a lot of carnage after the .com bust, and when we were hiring people, and they kept saying, "Pay me cash. I don't want any equity compensation whatsoever."
Oh yeah.
So it's I guess that we have to figure out how to live within our means, and we can't do stock options or other things because people just they'd be leaving from.
You were just in college during the .com boom.
Yeah.
You didn't actually experience it as a founder, but it informed a lot of your thinking because the people you were hiring were coming and licking their wounds.
Yeah, and I had friends who were running companies or who were at companies, and they said, you can get away with paying nothing to people, and you just give them stock options.
Right.
And then we started doing interviewing for our first engineering people, and that was not how it went.
Yeah. They were like, stock options are worthless.
They were worthless, and they would, they'd have the tax liability and no job, and that was tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, it did. A lot of people got whipsawed. And so the company starts making significant millions of dollars a year and is significantly profitable. And at some point, you finally decide you're going to actually raise capital and form a board, fast forwarding 10 years into the business.
Yeah, so and that gives it probably the thought process that's not due.
Right.
Probably last year we said, what do we want to do? We should have some sort of governance or accountability, because we were starting to get to 100 people or so, and starting to, there were decisions that we could make that would certainly affect a lot of lives. And so we thought we should surround ourselves kind of with smarter people, and the decision to raise funding was really kind of a risk calculation and a risk calibration for one of the other co-founders.
Yeah. So you go to market for your A round, as it were, as a 10-year-old company.
Yeah.
With, one would assume, you know, if you have 100 employees, millions or tens of millions of dollars in revenue. What's that like as a founder going out and saying like, hey, we're going to raise capital? I mean,
you get a lot of choices, but really it comes down to people. And we had been in contact with a number of people that had reached out to us and were friendly. And I had always taken the Zappos approach where you give everybody a half hour. And so we knew kind of what the personalities were like and the people. At
what's the Zappos approach?
Well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but he's very open about talking or meetings or whatever. And so he always believes in spending a half hour with anyone.
Spend a half hour with anyone is Tony's approach.
And even if it's something you have no idea how it'll
turn out
or end up turn out, it's still worth time. You still meet somebody else.
So you meet a ton of VCs and you decide to raise a little bit of money. Tell us about that process and where did you wind up? And
So it was at the Nantucket conference June of last year, and we ran into some people from Northbridge and hit it off really well.
Yeah.
I have to say that there was a little bit of chasing back and forth the first time they actually came up here. I had a prior engagement. I didn't actually think that it was going to still happen. I thought that it had gotten canceled or whatever, but I met a couple other people in the Kyle and Gray and the management team, and again hit it off really well. And it was a good time for the co-founder of kind of reallocating risk.
Yeah. So you get one of the other founders left and was able to sell some of their shares, and now you've basically, in a way, put the company on a new trajectory, which is high growth and professionalizing, as you said, and just sort of making it more stable. How has that worked out, and how has that transition been for somebody who hasn't had any, essentially oversight? Like you've been in a sort of standard business, a normal business in the normal world, not a venture-backed business. To add that sort of dynamic, how has that been for you as a CEO?
Well, I'd like to say that we're still in the honeymoon period, but it's 4 or 5 months later, and still doing pretty well. I mean, the company continues to perform well, which I think is important for any venture-backed company, and I think that we take a pretty conservative approach to how we do things, and that helps. But it's been a pretty additive process. I mean, there's certainly things that I've had to learn. Running a board meeting is a fascinating new study for me.
How so?
The managing of information. What do you talk about? What's the agenda? What do other people want to talk about? How does that all fit together? Making sure that there's the right chorus of voices. And then it's not just managing the board, but it's also managing the management team's expectations of, do I get to know this information, or are we talking about this or this thing? I have I have a lot of interest in this particular decision. How does this other person that I haven't met influence that decision? So there's a lot more of back and forth, kind of the nuances, but.
And how do you prioritize? I mean, you're the CEO. There's a million things you could talk about at a board meeting, right? And so how do you think about it? Like, what is the optimal board meeting, and the purpose of it?
I guess for me, how I've thought about structuring is, what are the things that are in my head that we have to think about, and maybe the time scale is the best thing. Like if I'm an engineer, I'm thinking about what's the scrum that I'm working on, what's the sprint I'm working on. It's a 2-week cycle. If I'm a manager, maybe it's a couple months.
Right.
If I'm a director, maybe it's the quarter or couple quarter planning, and then you kind of go up the chain, and it's probably on. There's a calendar schedule in my head, or there's some sort of 4-quarter or 16-quarter type of time frame that I'm thinking about, and so. The things that matter, that impact those quarters, and there's certainly the operational piece, but I guess that's how I've started calibrating. So
as you move up, the view of the battlefield, as it were, sort of widens, the time horizon, and what are we really trying to accomplish here on a multi-year, not just multi-quarter, not just multi-week, not just multi-day basis.
And it's been a challenge for me because I'm spending time on that, which means I'm spending not time on the tactical side, which means other people hopefully are spending the time on the tactical side. And so there's this kind of huge shift.
You're fighting the war, and other people have to fight the battles.
Yeah.
And it just and does it make it less enjoyable for you as a founder? Do you find, my God, I'm spending so much time up here in this tent at with the 10,000-foot view. I kind of miss being in the trenches.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but I think that the lieutenants also probably like that because they're the field commanders, and they get to make a lot more of the tactical decisions, and so we hope that the strategy and the tactics line up.
You've got a really wonderful culture here at the company. How have you, how much of that just happened, and then how much of it have you sort of worked on and curated, as it were?
I'd say that putting culture first was something we did really early on. And it came from, we graduated college and we're like, oh, we're on our own health insurance. And I can tell you that there are a lot of schemes, and not just over health insurance, but on all sorts of employee program, incentive programs, that you can skew stuff by pay and by age really well. But if you are young and you're paid kind of on average with the rest of your team, there's not that many things you can do. Right. And so we came up with a semi-egalitarian kind of system, and we really thought about treating people well and keeping them, because you lease talent, you don't own it. And so it was a very deliberate process in the beginning of thinking about culture and maintaining it. And we found that was actually time well spent, was thinking about, certainly in a company that's growing, you're constantly rehiring people, because the company they signed up for last year isn't the company that they signed up for this year.
Oh, that's a fascinating concept. Yeah, I came in when it was 50 people. Now there's 100, and there's all these people in between me and the decisions that used to be made. And wow, it's just much different. And how do you have to go check and take their temperature, make sure they're still into it?
Yeah, and it's a lot easier for me, because I'm supposedly making the decisions that matter to people, but the people who have gotten either there's more layers of management, or they're working on a narrower piece of technology. I mean, there are people here that the 7th or 8th person at the company, and that's that's a huge challenge. But they still have a great insight in the business, and they're still great contributors, and having that calibration is that's something that we spend a lot of time on.
And I suppose being in a smaller tech hub, you are less. You have less turnover to worry about. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Yeah.
Compared to somebody like, let's say, in Boston or New York or the Valley.
Yeah, I say we get a benefit from that. I mean, the cost structure is probably we get a little bit of a value of, and being the company we are. I mean, if we were in Boston, I'd say that we'd be competitive, but I think in kind of the 50 miles north of Boston, we do get a better kind of pick at talent.
And the lifestyle up here is delightful for people who get to, live outside of Boston. I mean, that's got to be a draw in a way, that you can come up here and actually own a home on a reasonable salary, a nice home, and have a great lifestyle and no commute essentially, or like a modest commute, as it were. So how do you leverage those sort of assets? Are you going to people at Boston companies and saying, hey, you're commuting already into the city and it sucks, or you're living in a shoebox in the city, you having a family, have a family out here and work at a company that's really stable?
Yeah, that works really well. I mean, the reverse commute, I mean, somebody might live halfway between Boston and Manchester, but it's a lot quicker to drive north during the morning than it is to drive south. Yeah. So I think all those things have really helped. And as the company has looked for more professional talent, it's been a great thing for us, because we have been able to continue to grow and find the people that we really want. Yeah. It's still, still competitive for tech talent, not going to lie there.
How many people have you hired in the past year, and how many you're hiring in the next year?
We hired about a little under 100 last year, and we'll probably hire about 100 people this year. So
you were at 100, went to 200, and now going to 300, sort of ballpark. Yeah. How does a company change going from 100 to 200? Are you actually able to remember everybody in the building's name? Are you actually able to know? As the CEO and founder, are you able to, really bond with people, or at a certain point, does that go away? And how does that affect your ability to lead?
I guess the question would be, what doesn't change? Yeah. Because pretty much everything changes. Yeah. And, I was actually just spending some time with Gail Goodman from Constant Contact yesterday, and we were talking about this, and she's at a 1,200-person company.
1,200, yeah.
1,200. Yeah. And, I mean, I have intimate relationships with a lot of people, in a comparative, six or a sixth the size. So, yeah, you try to be, I love the dealing with people, working with people, learning people's background, trading stories. I mean, this is ultimately a social endeavor. We're a company, we're a group of individuals that work in a collective. So you still get to do that, but you just don't get to do it with everyone. Right. And last year I left for paternity leave, a second kid, and we were about 110, and I come back and we're like 144. And that was the time in which I didn't know everybody's name.
And it's a really weird kind of experience to be like, wait, there's 30 people's names I've got to go learn. And what do you do here?
What do you do?
meet somebody in the kitchen, like, what are you doing at my company? Like,
I've seen your name on a spreadsheet. I mean, that, and it's probably not that funny to say to somebody like, oh, I've seen your name on a spreadsheet for a while. And maybe that's not the best way to introduce yourself, but
it is true. It becomes a little bit surreal for you. This was done out of your dorm room.
Yeah.
It's got to be a very surreal feeling.
It is. I think the only thing that's made it actually something that like the mind can actually grok is that each year it's changed incrementally. So if it was dorm room yesterday and then it was, the people that have the super hyper growth, man, I really feel for them because each year it gets incrementally a little bit different. Last year was not knowing everybody, and this year it's how does the management team and directors and how do we do departments. So each year there's kind of a theme or there's some sort of role change.
But you seem to be very good at reaching out and finding mentors and people who've done these things before. With Northbridge, you added Rick, who's a pretty famous founder. Has he been a great mentor to you? Or?
He has.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Rick and his role. So.
Rick Fulop, so he's done a couple companies. The last one, it's been in the news, probably not in the most positive light. A123 Systems,
the battery company,
very
famous, incredibly innovative and tremendously successful. Even though it had a bad outcome, I guess it shut down or went bankrupt or something.
Yeah, asset sale of some form, I think.
Yeah.
But he was there kind of day one, and then he was there at 1,700 people. So. That whole, like, how does a person grow? How does a person evolve? Where does he spend his time? And talked a lot about the kind of the human nature of it. And I think that's, there's certainly operations, there's certainly product, there's technology things, there's finance things. But really, it's like you have to really enjoy people and the kind of the messiness of people.
Yeah.
And in their business, they had such an international component to what they did, and people were going back and forth between here and China where they were manufacturing the batteries. And he talked about the huge toll that had on both like the staff and on him and his family. I mean, that was a tough thing, and that's something that it doesn't get probably the fair love that it does.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's part of the challenge of running and growing a company is the travel, it's the human relationships, it's those things.
The stress. I mean, just the toll it takes on a person. That kind of the growth equals problems, equals stress, equals having to solve it. I mean, we're seeing this discussion come up more and more often, sadly, because we've seen a couple of people kill themselves in the industry, and people are making this sort of jump. Well, the stress got to them or the pressure got to them, and we don't know if that's exactly the case, but nobody can deny that being a founder in a high-growth company is extraordinarily stressful.
You just keep saying it's fun, and that way you completely bypass the
so
stress.
So just denial is the best strategy?
That's right.
That's what you found?
Tomorrow will be better than today. No, I mean,
how do you manage your own? I mean,
there is a huge amount of stress, and I guess the rules, I guess, around it is people always will ascribe like things that they're annoyed about, decisions like, hey, we're gonna do this font face, or we're gonna, this isn't gonna make it into the product or whatever, and they always think that there's malice behind it. And I think that's one thing that I continually say is people are making the best decisions based on the information that they have and the context they have.
Right.
And sometimes you wish that people had a different context, or like, well, they should have my context, and they maybe would make a better decision, but you have to really just kind of look at the long term, and there's things along the way that you may not like, but how important are they in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, and that people in a vacuum, it's interesting you point out, will assume, my God, I'm in this high growth company and this decision was made, and how could management make that decision? It's so obvious to me from this angle, their own personal angle, that this is the right decision. And in fact, there are many ways in which to solve the same problem. So, there's just like there's 5 different routes between here and, whatever city. There might be 4 or 5 different ways to solve a problem. You've just chosen one. And it's not that you're negating the other 4 as a potentiality. It's just you have to pick one and keep moving forward. And I think that's maybe where culture can play a role in sort of smoothing out my route was not the one picked.
Yeah, it's the trust and saying, hey, this the people are trying to make good decisions. We've done a couple swaps. We had our CTO and our chief revenue officer swap roles for a day. And great perspective for both of them to have, and their teams. And that's, I think, you start building that context around people, and like, oh, okay, I understand that if I want a feature, it doesn't just show up next week. And the same thing of, why do customers always want the things that aren't built? And you start kind of doing that cross education. It just adds to a more trusting environment.
What's your take on the internet and its sovereignty, stability. We're seeing so many people looking at this beautiful, oasis that was built and trying to control it now. Whether it's, the UN talking about different controls to put in place, governments outside the United States government. I mean, can the internet remain an independent, free, open platform, or does it feel like, to you, having studied on an infrastructure basis, we're heading in a direction of control, and maybe it's not going to be as freewheeling?
I hope that it keeps its independence, and to say it's completely independent now is probably. Even in the United States, there are things that you can do on the internet that you can't do. What we would say as the right things, and other countries would say, you should. Those are freedoms that you're taking away, and so you get this really interesting, and you can't line them up because it's not a continuum. It's a very multifaceted conversation about, right of privacy and right of to public knowledge, and different countries have different calibrations for how that works. I think that the internet and ICANN, it's been a fascinating kind of learning lesson for how does a nation-state model that we're used to, and I'm a resident of the United States, so I live under U.S. law, but I'm also part of a global internet. And what rules kind of define me if I'm interacting with somebody from Sweden or from Russia or from China? And that's a tough question to try to untangle and unravel. Certainly in the United States, you have internet service providers that have different rules. A lot of the core ARPANET infrastructure that morphed into the internet is based in the U.S., so the Department of Commerce and the U.S. government have a sizable role still to this day, from an influence perspective. It's an ongoing conversation, and certainly with the new GTLD round that's going on, it's a fascinating thing to watch. Yeah.
So explain the new global top-level domains. The ICANN has approved you could have any dot anything.
.json.
I could have .json. You could, yeah. Why anybody would have that, I have no idea. But
are you applying for one?
I am not, but I did think about it. So people, there'll be a .yahoo, a .google, obviously, and .anything. Yeah. And somebody will control that. They pay $250,000 for a license or something, and they have to prove that they can actually maintain it, I guess. What impact is that going to have on the internet? Do you agree with it, and where does it stand? There's a lot of questions there.
Well, so ICANN is going through, the first time that they have to answer a lot of these questions. They've, I think the last real round that they rolled out with new top-level domains was probably 2001 or 2006. .jobs, .arrow, .museum. They're not ones that really had a lot of pickup, and they were generic top-level domains, and now we're seeing more brand ones.
Nobody can even spell .museum, so
yeah,
that's it's like nobody. That's dead on arrival.
But there's still some technology reasons, because the top-level domains, they're all in US ASCII, and if you are a native Chinese speaker, you have to use a character set to denote a domain name that probably shouldn't be the case. We should have some sort of interoperable language scheme. But that's one of the reasons why people have been interested in the new top-level domains.
So we may see a top-level domain with a they're ASCII, I guess?
Non-ASCII characters.
Non-ASCII characters. So what would be an example of a non-ASCII character? Because right now you can't have certain things like you couldn't have a tilde in a domain name.
No.
Or a slash, obviously.
Yeah, or you could have a tilde, but it's still .com. And so there's a few top-level domains now that are more of an experimental of being able to have non-US ASCII characters through a scheme called Punycode. So the browser hides away the character set. But there's English is not the most predominantly spoken language on the planet, so kind of makes sense that if this is a communication mechanism, that other languages are supported other than just English.
And what impact will it have if we have thousands or tens of thousands of new subdomains? We call them top-level domains. Top-level domains, TLDs. Is that going to damage the .com franchise and the value of them, or is it just going to be like just noise and it's not going to have any impact?
Nobody knows. It's probably somewhere in the middle between noise and having a huge impact. I think it'll allow people in a regional context to be able to communicate better with their user base, and whether it's a brand that's able to communicate with their user base, you can start thinking to yourself, hey, I'm a U.S. citizen, but I also have an affinity or relationship with this global brand, and being able to have those conversations. And I think you've seen governments be a little weary about that because they see that direct connection starting to change.
So the people in China reading the New York Times is sort of the classic example. Like, gosh, you can't really work on that. And anonymity on the internet. Most people believe they have anonymity on the internet. As an infrastructure person, I mean, you know very well that it's probably a little bit of an illusion.
Yeah, it's a little false.
A little bit false. I mean, people can be traced and tracked very easily. Very hard to be truly anonymous on the internet, correct? Or not?
No, it's pretty easy. I mean, the people that do hide their privacy, it's through obfuscation. It's through kind of like moving stuff around. It's not through kind of the real. I'm anonymous.
And so, do you think that's going to change? We've seen in Korea, China, and some of those places, to sign up even for a Twitter account or their version of Twitter and Facebook, you need to put in your social security number, and you have to really be an actual individual. This idea of pseudonyms has gone away in some societies. You think that's going to be sort of baked into the internet?
I don't think so. I mean, more and more it's going to be different. And this is where it's different because in the United States, it's a fairly, I mean, there's major ISPs, but there's a lot of choices about how you connect to the internet, and there's different ways of doing it. In other countries, you don't really get as many choices, and so they're more government regime. They're more, my way or the highway.
Right.
I think as time goes on, there'll be different ways for those people to connect, and it's a generational thing, and everybody wants progress to happen really quick, but to have a completely democratic internet infrastructure or internet where you can say anything and do anything. I mean, that's for the United States. That I think is a lot easier for citizenry to kind of grab a hold of, and I think it's a lot more challenging. And you see it in the kind of the Arab Springs and other things of like, wow, there's this way that we can communicate, and how does that play out? I mean, it's a very different type of technology, and to have something that's not necessarily advanced, but just so much different. How do people cling to that? I think that's, governments are going to wrestle with that for a long time. Of, do we require information? What if we don't require information? And then getting things right or wrong and trying to clean up after the fact.
Let's talk a little bit. It's sort of a segue with the governments, espionage and criminal activity on the internet. Because you're in the routing business, I would assume some amount of shenanigans with an open service you mentioned earlier occur. How has that changed over a decade of you running the service? I mean, 10 years ago, did you get X amount of law enforcement people showing up in your offices, and now you get 100X? And is it more sophisticated, and Chinese hackers, Russian hackers, all this kind of stuff that's going on? How much does that impact an infrastructure company today?
There's still a good amount of noise of people that are doing bad things, and they're different levels of sophistication. You get your, we would classify them by age. You get your 16-year-old, and they're just kind of like casual recreational attacker. And then you get your 18-year-old who's a little bit more sophisticated, probably has a particular target in mind, and then you get the people who are really organized, and they have a particular agenda. They're funded. They know what they're doing, and I'd say that the people who are organized, that number probably has gotten a lot higher. Who know what they're doing, who have a particular agenda in mind.
So you're not seeing the casual. It's not just the casual drive-by. I'm a script kiddie, or I'm a bona fide hacker who figured out a couple of things I can do that are damaging or just entertaining for me and damaging to others, denial of service attacks, etc. Now it's coordinated. And who are those people? I mean, is it everything from Russian hackers to the Chinese government?
It's all over.
Yeah.
And our technology, I mean, and kind of how our technology's gotten used, we used to be one of the only ways in which you could have this infrastructure, and we were a coordination method. So you go infect a bunch of machines, and then you have this one host that you tell all these machines to connect to, and then we were basically routing people to the control center, and then they would go march off and send off their attacks or whatever. And as people said and found that there were these central hubs, they could go disconnect them, and it's like cutting off the head of a beast. Well, they've gotten smarter and more organized, and so now they're more splinter cells, and they have like these little hives and little buckets, and so that way you can't just shut them off kind of all for one. So there's been a whole bunch of like the Stuxnets and the configures, and I mean there's been a long evolution about how these things have kind of progressed.
And how at risk is the infrastructure? We have seen, you know, when EC2 goes down at Amazon, you know, half the internet sites go off because people don't even understand how to have redundant data centers, it seems, or just haven't taken the time to do it.
No, it's such a crime in this day and age for the outages to happen.
It is a little weird, isn't it, that like a Tumblr or a Twitter could go down completely? It makes no sense that one of these sites would go down completely because you could mirror the entire site to a rack space or to another provider. Well, why does that still happen? Is it just that people haven't had the time to?
Yeah, I think so. Or just
busy scaling?
So busy scaling, so they haven't thought about the other option.
Why doesn't that just happen automatically? I mean, it would seem to me that the internet, or is that something we'll expect, this sort of redundant cloud infrastructure?
I think that'll continue to get better as now people will be able to spend time on it. But going back to the attack stuff of just like, is the internet at risk? You know, there's always kind of the next greatest threat, and it's, you know, just like any sort of illness or flu, you know, we're just one step away. There are certainly ways that people could take down the internet.
There are.
I think so. I think if you had enough smart people, they could think about how to take the internet down, but then they couldn't do anything else.
They wouldn't be able to use the internet. They would have basically they would be trapped on the island just like everybody else. There'd be no infrastructure for them to fly around. So it's almost a self-correcting mechanism. Like, and do you think another government could take down, you know, theoretically the Chinese or the Russians could take each other down, or America down, you know, the infrastructure, the DNS routing, if you just absolutely assaulted that, sustained, would they actually be able to turn the internet off in the United States, or would we be able to just shut them off with the routers?
Yeah,
you know?
I don't think it would play out like that. I think what would happen, you know, we've said that the internet from kind of military and commercial purposes is called this dual purpose.
Right.
So you have military traffic, you have commercial traffic. And we actually kind of like the commercial traffic. We like to be able to use Twitter. We like to be able to purchase things online. We like to be able to regulate utility grids and other things. And yeah, I mean, there are ways you could do regional types of damage, but from a really sustained manner. I mean, I'm not a security person, but this is, you know, just me going out on a limb. I think we enjoy the technology, even the people that would do these attacks. Yeah. And there's not that many super permanent things you could do. So it's only as long as people are pulling a switch.
Yeah, they to actually do a sustained attack would require sustaining the attack.
Yeah,
and eventually you'd find those people and be able to stop them, I guess.
Yeah, and those things happen, and they happen on a regular basis. Some of them make the news, some of them don't. Sometimes it'll touch something, and it will kind of get some public media play. But for the most part, it's a real pretty robust. I mean, it was designed to be. It was designed to be robust in the event of nuclear war from the Cold War days, and that was the whole design. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's been such a successful thing, is that you can have a pretty global, pretty universally addressable. I can talk to anybody in the world over the internet. But there's still regional kind of dialects, regional rule sets of some people blocking content, some people shutting things off, countries occasionally disconnecting off the internet because they don't like what's going on YouTube. It happens, but eventually everything kind of corrects.
And we've heard for a decade about, you know, this sort of Internet 2 and higher level internet happening. Is the internet that we currently use just evolving so well that there's not going to be like a next generation internet? Or will we see a next generation internet with a new IP system, with a new routing system, et cetera? Yeah,
a lot of the people that that go to the IETFs and talk about the protocols, they said that they did such a wonderful job, and it's almost a crime that they didn't think with such a long futuristic view. And like we've been talking about IP exhaustion, how we're running out of V4 addresses on the internet, and that's, you know, it's going to stop commerce or whatever. But people just figure out ways to adapt to it. But all these proposals for kind of these future internets have been kicking around for 20, 30 years, and maybe eventually we'll get there, but I think a lot of the innovation is going to happen on more of the applications, how we interface with technology. I think that the infrastructure that was designed was a lot of good work that people put in over a number of decades, and we're still exploiting kind of the things that you can do on the internet, which is a really cool thing. I mean, DNS and email actually are 30, 20-year-old technologies. We're still trying to figure out how to push the envelope with it, and there's still a lot of life left on it.
Yeah, and broadband in the U.S. And just that sort of next step function. We're seeing it in wireless, which is fascinating. Yeah. LTE,
yep.
and that has taken over that's the traffic story of the internet today.
Yeah, if people are making bets, it's mobile. That's how we're going to interact, and you just see how people are using technology. It's not. Yeah, I mean, people are still using laptops, they're still using desktops, but it's the mobile devices where that's where the infrastructure improvements are going to be.
And it's already for broadband. You think that will become the way broadband gets rolled out in the United States in a big way, or do you think we're actually going to ever see fiber to the home kind of stuff?
I don't know. I mean, there's certainly theoretical limits on wireless, but the wireless technology, like if we said as a country in the U.S., if we wanted to do wireless and we wanted to do Wi-Fi like that, we could probably do that, and we'd probably get the video quality that we'd want, and maybe fiber isn't that important, but somebody else probably has that spreadsheet that can tell you better.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch the Google fiber experiment, which doesn't seem like much of an experiment to me. That seems to be the start of a rollout plan. They've already talked about a second city being added. And, I mean, that sort of goes back to what you said earlier in the conversation, that there's so many options. Nobody can really control this. We're going to see another level of ISP, in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think so. And going to Google, I mean, they've done Wi-Fi in towns before. They did a big push in Mountain View, and they did one in San Francisco. And I'm guessing that they learned that, hey, that's not the way to keep doing it. We're going to do fiber. So it's a fascinating thing to see how internet service providers are starting to roll out here in New Hampshire. And Maine and Vermont. Verizon sold their wireline business to Fairpoint, and they said, to get the rural community, we're going to do the WISP method.
Which is?
Wireless internet service provider. And it's kind of point-to-point, and they have a repeater in a home. There's still a good portion of the rural community that doesn't have broadband access, which, again, in kind
it's
of
fascinating.
2013, like, wow, people don't have broadband?
Yeah, and in Australia, they did a whole thing where they essentially made broadband. They had so much money in tax.
Yeah.
Because they sell so much minerals to China, they had so much money. They said, "Oh, well, let's just spend a bunch of money getting everybody in rural places onto broadband." And they would spend $5,000 to get like somebody who lived on a farm broadband because they could. It was pretty. I don't know if you followed that.
Yeah. It was somebody who used to be the former head of ICANN who went on and was talking about this huge project and kind of helped roll it out. And if you can spend $5,000 per person for broadband, that's great.
Well, it's 70 million homes here in the U.S.
That's a couple pennies.
It's a couple of pennies, but it seems like a lot less than the couple of wars that we've had. So it seems like it could work. Listen,
but smart people made good decisions about that money.
They did?
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to see that money back. It doesn't seem like it's going to work that well. Well, listen, continued success. And I should note, I joined the board of the company. You guys reached out to me. And so I was a user of the product for my home setup. Again, I'm one of those, like home users because I wanted to be able to route my IPs on my security cameras and knew the company from that. And you guys reached out to me. I don't know, was it a year ago, Kyle, or so? Something a year ago. We met, and I couldn't believe what a tremendous business. And you guys asked me to join the board and help you guys on this journey, and I did that. And I'm actually here for the board meeting, or for, I guess, our second board meeting, post-funding of the company. It's been really great to get to know the company and watch it grow. If people wanted to get involved, what's the ways they can get involved? You're looking for talent. I know that.
Send me an email at jeremy@dyn.com.
That's simple.
That's simple.
I always tell people, just always first name at the company. Like even Steve Jobs, he was Steve J.
Yeah.
It was so great that he responded to a couple of my emails. I'm like, I kind of feel like those emails are like
You should print them out and frame
That's
them.
exactly what it is. Like, I have Steve Jobs responded to my emails. It's like having Da Vinci or somebody like, imagine like Da Vinci returned your letter, you know, or who, you know, whatever, Einstein. Like, this is like going to go down in history as like one of the most important people of the century. And he responded to my email. I just print, and it was like a one line, like, I'll take care of it, you know?
Oh, that's cool.
Well, they kicked Engadget out of one of the keynotes, and I had met Steve Jobs at a couple of events, and my blogger said, we got kicked out of the Steve keynote tomorrow. He's going to launch the iPhone, whatever. And so I email him. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning before he's giving the keynote to do the iPhone opening. He says, I'll take care of it.
And he did?
And he did. He got them at 1 in the morning. It was like, you know, the Engadget guys could come to the... Yeah, it was somebody in marketing had been upset that they wrote something and then they kicked him out of the keynote, and then Steve just, you know...
That was great because there were so many stories about him just being an accessible person, and I mean, even though, you know, running Apple and doing all sorts of things, there was still so many stories about him just corresponding with people and taking care of even the very. I'm not saying that it was minutia, but you know, certainly he was getting
details.
very involved. The details.
I mean,
And I think that made a huge
super
difference.
important.
Yeah.
I mean, as a CEO, like the details that are going wrong. I mean, it is the thing is we're getting back to the CEO stress. Anything that's going wrong in the business comes to your desk. So you hire 200 smart people here, and the reward you get for all this great success that you've had is whatever they can't figure out comes to you every day.
Chief janitor.
It's like, wow, the coffee machine sucks and the parking is a problem. What are the problems you're facing now? Is it the coffee machine and the parking problems, or is it like the fundamental core issues with the business?
So
what do you get more of?
Oh, it's a mix. I mean, you want to delegate. You want to make sure you delegate both of them because both the details, I mean, they can drive you nuts, and you try to get people aligned with it. But it's also the strategy ones where you want to delegate both. But you know, we have a new coffee machine and parking this morning because we have a board meeting. A few people are driving in from it. I was panicking because nobody ever listens to me about parking.
No.
And so I asked our management team to park away from the building. Yeah. And I walked by, all the spaces were completely open.
Awesome. Wow, finally.
First time in 2 years anyone has ever listened to me.
This is the
about parking.
Conclusion I've come to. Like, when people are complaining about things that have absolutely nothing to do with the fundamental business, that means the fundamental business is doing really well. That's great. So I just cherish those moments. I'm like, really, we have a problem with the bathroom because of, you know, the soap is dripping and it's making a mess on the floor. I will get on it. And we problem solved, we brainstormed, and we put a bucket underneath the automatic. There was a problem with the soap making a mess, so then we got the automatic soap dispenser. The automatic soap dispenser was then causing a problem because you time it wrong, and then soap would on the floor. So now there's an automatic soap dispenser with the bucket under it. I'm assuming in the ladies' room as well. Okay, so anyway, it's obviously
they innovated
Brandis
around
just
it.
told me I've been alerted that the automatic soap machine is been destroyed or stolen or otherwise vandalized. And when I promise my team at Inside.com, I will get back to the office in this weekend and I will address the soap issues.
It's like median voter theorem. It's the people in the middle, and if the middle are these really like superficial type of things, it's better than running out of cash, having no customers.
Not making payroll, having a competitor kick your ass. These are the other problems. Or the servers being down, which thanks to DYN, they're never down.
Never down.
Keep them running. Hey, listen, Jeremy, it was a great interview and continued success. And we'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups.